What's up, kiddos? This is obviously going to be your homework, your lecture notes. Um, Obviously, it's explained to you guys in class what you're going to be asked to do. Obviously, copy these into your guided notes. There will also be an Edpuzzle, which you're watching this more than likely on Edpuzzle anyway. There'll be some questions embedded into the thing. So, yeah, just go ahead and answer. Pretty simple, easy peasy overall. But because you guys had that ring meeting on Monday. We're a little bit behind compared to other classes. So yeah. Anyway, all right. So what we did in class today was a little class simulation on how how we went from 13 states to how we were going to expand. And we talked about we showed in that simulation, how land was divided up and why it was divided up and the process with an auction. So today, our topic is going to be on the Northwest Territory and talking more about that more in detail in terms of, I guess, our government under the Articles and how they are going to expand. So, what is, first of all, like the Northwest Territory? In your copy this in your guided notes, and again, there'll be questions as you guys will see here in a little bit. So, Northwest Territory, what are we talking about here? There we go. The Northwest Territory is really these states just to the west of the 13 original states. So here's Pennsylvania. See my cursor right here. That's Pennsylvania, and here's Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, New York. Those were the 13 states. Now, obviously we're going to be looking to expand westward, as you guys see on the map. So Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and that state up north that we're not going to mention. But this was very valuable land. For one, it was convenient. It bordered these 13 states. But two, look at the natural resources this land has. Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan. So you have a fresh water source. That's good for farming. It's good for a shipping industry, fishing. And also, Ohio as well, and Indiana, and all these states had very hunting and fishing was thriving. The fur trading business was thriving. So this was very valuable land for all kinds of people. Again, fishermen, shippers, farmers, you name it. And obviously used for people need is water. So naturally, this is going to be the first areas that we're going to look to try and expand from 13 into adding more states. So yeah, hope you have that. Hope that makes sense to you. All right, so where did this land come from and who controlled it before we did? Well, before we had it, before we added added on to states, this was all this land I just showed you guys in the last slide. All that was once controlled by Great Britain. Well, guess what? Great Britain's out of here. We beat them in the American Revolutionary War. So in 1783, Great Britain's like, well, we don't really need this land anymore. There's really no use for it. It's thousands of miles away. We don't control the East Coast. All that now is American territory that was lost in the war. So we don't have any need for Ohio and all these areas. So in the Treaty of Paris, they basically ceded or gave up the lands to the new American government under the Articles of Confederation. So now the $1 million question is, okay, well, we have this land now, Ohio, Indiana. Now, again, those weren't states yet. So I'm going to pause and kind of go backwards a little bit. These were just territories. We had all this land, all this territory. Now what to do with it? So I know it's kind of hard to see, but if you kind of zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see that basically there became this land grab. Look at North Carolina. They claimed all this land from here to the Mississippi River. Georgia, same thing. They kind of claimed all this land over here. Virginia, they go from here all the way to Mississippi. Then see up here, you see a little bit Massachusetts and Virginia, which were very powerful states back then. Virginia up here in Wisconsin. So you basically have this land grab of like the big, powerful states at the time. Again, as I said, Virginia and New York and Massachusetts. They began to kind of use their power, use their might to basically claim all this Northwest Territory land. Well, guess who's going to be upset? It's going to be the states that don't get it, that don't get the territory, they don't get added on land. So you kind of have this rivalry forming between small states and big states. That's not what you want with the new government under the Articles, with rivalry and already arguing, already starting. So obviously that's not going to work. So that leads us into this. Thomas Jefferson is like, hey, let's take a time out and pause. We have all this territory. Let's try to make this fair and easy and natural for our country. why don't we take this land and we'll separate it into states? So instead of having it belong to New York or Virginia or Georgia, we'll create new separate states. We'll go from 13 states and we'll add on as we go. So here was the kicker, that with these new states that are going to be added in, slavery will not be allowed to exist in the Northwest Territory. So Congress is going to meet and kind of take and debate and look at all different proposals, but ultimately they become attracted to Thomas Jefferson's proposal. So eventually Congress is going to pass the Land Ordinance of 1785. This is going to be the law that's going to establish the Northwest Territory, and that's going to allow these territories to start forming their own political systems. But ultimately, this is the kicker. This is kind of this. So this is what we did in class. That they're going to have all this land, they're going to carve it up, and they're going to sell it at an auction, which is what we did in class. So this process, this document, the land ordinance, is going to allow the auction to take place. Okay, so why an auction? Let's talk about that now. Again, we already did this in class, but let's review. Oh, my bad. So think about this. The biggest problem under the Articles was debt. Think about the powers of the national government, right, under the Articles. They couldn't tax, so they had a huge money problem. So this money problem, that France wanted their money, they helped us in the war. They had to pay back soldiers like Daniel Shea for fighting in the war. They couldn't pay him back. So we had a huge debt money problem. Okay, so why an auction? Think back to what we just did in class with the auction process. If you do an auction, you can make more money that way. You're selling land for above market value. So as you guys saw in the auction, in some cases, to buy a plot of land costs $640. But as you guys learned and you guys saw, because of an auction, some groups really wanted certain plots, and that money went up to $700 or $800. So this was a great way for the government to make money and solve their debt issue. But it also helped, as you guys saw in the auction, this also provided another problem or solution to the problem, was that, again, think of Daniel Shea. We weren't able to pay back Daniel Shea and farmers and soldiers like him. So because we had all this land and all this territory, why don't we just, if we can't give them money, why don't we give them land? And back then, guys, land was very valuable. You can do so much with land. You can farm on it to make money, to make your living, but also voting power. So think back to Daniel Shea's rebellion. All that, one of the reasons why they rebelled was because a lot of them went to prison and they couldn't vote. So to repay the veterans, Congress offered them land in the Northwest Territory. So again, think back to the activity that we did in class. 4 sections in each township was given to veterans. Boom. So not only are you solving the debt issue, but you're solving the veterans of war issue too, by appeasing them, by giving them a very valuable piece of land. All right, so finally, after 2 years, 2 years of auctioning off all this land, so now you have auctioned off land in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois and so forth, Congress are going to meet again. They're going to pass the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. So basically, what is that? What's the main purpose? Ultimately, now, again, all those lands that were auctioned, again, these were still territories. They were not states. So now, over those 2 years, our populations are going to start to go up. They're going to start to increase. So, okay, so what do we need to do for those territories to become states? Well, ultimately, guys, this document is going to outline what you need for a territory to become a state. So, again, I just explained this. Provided a process for territories to become states. So that's kind of what you need to know. So the first process is this. When a territory reaches 5,000 free adult males, that territory can begin electing a state legislature in that state to represent them. That's the first step. So 5,000 is the key number. 5,000 people, they can have an election in that state to where they elect a state legislature. Okay, so once you get to 60,000, that's the next state, that's the next step. Once you get to 60,000, now that state legislature that was already voted upon in the first step, they can begin drafting a state constitution. Okay, so here was the stipulations. In that state constitution, they had to guarantee that no slavery was allowed in any of these territories, and every citizen was guaranteed a fair trial. Again, that's Enlightenment ideas, guys. No slavery. So think about that. No slavery. Hobbes, Locke, natural rights, life, liberty, property. Everybody has a right to have property, everybody has a right to life and liberty and freedom. That's enlightenment. Have a right to fair trials. That's very similar to like a drawing a blank. Voltaire. Free speech, religion. Everybody should have some freedoms. All right, so there you go. There's enlightenment thought into our land process. Okay, so once you make your state constitution, you then, once it's finished and you have all these things done, you would then send it to the federal government and they would approve it. So, okay, so all these things you guys just saw. So in class, I just want to kind of show you guys this. See this little yellow thing here that's highlighted? Here's a zoomed in version of it. This is what you guys did in class specifically. So this one little section was divided up into 36 sections. So this is what you guys would bid on. Now notice, every section would be the exact same thing. So I'm just kind of putting this perspective to kind of show you guys. So these areas were 6 miles long. This box is 6 miles long, 6 miles tall. So that's what you guys did in class. Now each section you guys just did would be the exact same process. So this is how land was divvied up. So again, I just wanted to show you guys that. So that's called a township. This is a township. That's a township. It's all separate. Kind of what you guys see here in Grafton. All right, we did this in class. We talked about the soldiers getting plots. So you guys see that plot 8, plot 11, plot 26, plot 29 was all for soldiers and 16 was school. So that's how it was in every township. All right. So anyway, guys, that is it. Have a good night, and make sure tissue box projects, you're getting started on those. And yeah, adios.